Tyler Rich. I'm 21. I am a plumber.
On May 14th of 2022, how old were you?
I was 18 at the time. I was a senior. That is my house.
On May 14th of 22, did you have people at your house that evening?
I did.
How did it start?
It just started with a couple buddies at my house. As time went on, a couple more of our buddies ended up showing up, and some of our older friends were home for like the first weekend from their freshman year of college, ended up coming by, and they kind of just stuck around, I guess.
What time would you say you had friends initially come over? What time of day was it?
Around like 7, 8 o'clock.
What kind of things were you doing at the house?
We were just hanging out in the basement, having normal conversations, maybe drinking a few beers.
And that night, were you drinking beer?
I had one or two.
And I want to ask you, are you familiar with an individual by the name of Faison Teal?
Yes, I
And
am.
how are you familiar with him?
I went to school with him. I played football with him, and I actually used to give him a ride to school every morning.
Showing you states 54. Do you know who this individual is here?
Yes, I do. What is Faison Teal?
Are you familiar with an individual by the name of Tommy Connor?
I am.
How are you familiar with Tommy Connor?
I went to school with him. We have mutual friends. He's a year older than me, but we used to hang out before he graduated.
I'll show you States Exhibit 55. Can you tell us who is that in States 55?
This is Tommy Connery.
Are you familiar with Ryan Heinz?
I am.
How are you familiar with Ryan Heinz?
I went to high school with him. He played football, and I was actually one of his captains senior year on the football team. This is Ryan Heinz.
And finally, are you familiar with an individual by the name of Jimmy McGrath?
I am.
How are you familiar with Jimmy McGrath?
He's from Shelton. We grew up with the same friend group, so we've always been around each other. Even though he went to prep for high school, we still hung out very often and had the same friend group. And he was one of my best friends prior to the event.
Showing you States 57. Who is in States 57?
This is Jimmy McGrath.
Now, are you familiar with Ricky Fiola?
I am.
How are you familiar with him?
Grew up with him, same friend group, played football with him. I was also his captain as well. But yeah, we're friends.
How about Sal Perry?
One of my best friends for a very long time.
What about Mike Sampieri? You know Mike Sampieri?
I do know Mike
How do
Sampieri.
you know him?
Also another good friend of mine for a long time.
How about Alex Bernstein?
Alex, I don't really know. The night all this happened was the first time I ever met him.
How about Charlie Connery?
Charlie, yes, that's Tommy's little brother. He was in the grade under me.
How about Jake Villalobos?
Yep, one of my best friends since first grade.
And how about Matt Lockett?
Also one of my best friends since we were little.
Now, the people I just mentioned, were they present at your house on May 14th of 22?
Yes, they were.
Did you invite them over?
Yes, I did.
Do you know Griffin?
I do. I was also his football captain my senior year as well. Played football with him.
Was there an occasion that night where Ryan and Griffin came to your house?
They did show up there. They told me that Heinz had big and jumped. My response to them was, I have too many people here already. If you guys need to hang out here until you could get a ride, that is all right, but you cannot stay.
What time of night was it when Ryan and Griffin showed up? Do you recall?
It was dark.
At that point in time when Ryan and Griffin showed up, about how many people would you say were at your house?
Probably about 30 people total.
When you had these 30 people at the house, were people drinking at your house?
Yeah, a little bit.
What kind of things were people drinking?
There was just some beer there. Maybe some of the girls had some seltzers. Nothing crazy. It wasn't an open keg, open cooler party as it was made to be by the media. But yeah, there was definitely people having a few beers.
Now, at some point in the evening, was there an occasion where people showed up to your house uninvited?
There was.
Can you please tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury the circumstances surrounding that?
So after Heinz and Griffin got there and I told them they couldn't stay,
Were you made aware that somebody showed up to your house?
yes, it came to my knowledge that there was a car full of kids outside.
What kind of car?
It was a green Honda Pilot SUV.
Is that the vehicle that you recall seeing that night?
Yes, it is.
When you were made aware that this car showed up at your house, where were you at that moment?
I was still in the basement along with everybody else at the time.
And at some point in time, did you exit the basement?
We did
How did you do that?
through the doors, which are on the right side of my house and kind of in front of the driveway, but it's on the right side of the house.
Stage 5. Can you kind of pinpoint where the doors would be?
So if you can see on the right side of the house, there's a AC unit. Just to the right of the AC unit, there is Bilco doors that go into the basement.
I'm pointing to what appears to be an AC unit on the right side of the house, just in which could be located in front of the blue pickup truck in a clearing through the trees. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
What did you do when you came out the doors?
I walked down the driveway and we went across the street. The first thing I noticed when we got near the car was I was able to see through the windshield Tyler
Do you know where this car was parked when you came down the driveway?
Yeah, so it was on the lower right-hand side across the street. Yep, right there where you're pointing in front of those trees.
The record could reflect, I'm pointing to the lower right-hand corner where there are some trees on, looks like the Laurel Glen on the right side near the curb of Laurel Glen.
Is that about
Correct.
Court will so noted on the record. Thank you.
So when you noticed the car parked in that area, what did you do?
Like I said, as I approached the car, I saw Tyler DaSilva through the windshield, and I know who he is, given that his cousins used to live down the street from me. So I immediately went to the passenger side of the car to his window to talk to him and tell him that I don't know why you guys are here. You are not welcome at my house, and you need to leave.
Are you familiar with any type of group chat that may have been going on?
I came to find out later that there was a group chat, but at the time of the event, I was not familiar with it.
Did you have any knowledge that Tyler DaSilva was coming to your house that night?
No, I did
At
not.
that point, no. When you approach the car, what side of the car do you approach it?
I believe I went in front of the car and I went to the passenger front window.
So if you're approaching if the car is parked on the side of the road here in States 49, is it facing Farmhouse Road or is it facing Ave?
It is facing Farmhouse up the street.
So you go to the passenger side,
Right.
and where is Tyler DaSilva sitting?
He is in the front passenger seat.
And you have a conversation with him,
Yes.
and what do you tell him?
I tell him that I'm not sure why you guys are here, but you cannot stay here and you need to leave.
And did the car leave at that point?
No, it did not.
At that point in time, did you notice anybody else in the car?
At that point in time, I was able to hear people start to argue on the other side of the car. So I kind of looked through from the passenger window to like the back driver's side of the car, and I was able to see Mackenzie Traficante and Raul Valle in the back seat.
Now, are you familiar with Mackenzie Traficante?
I am.
How are you familiar with her?
We grew up together. We were friends when we were younger before high school.
Did you go to school together?
We did.
Did you go to high school together?
No, we did not.
Do you know what school she went to?
She went to St. Joe's.
And you mentioned Raul Valle. Is Mr. Valle present in the courtroom today?
He is.
And what is he wearing?
A blue suit.
Can you point him out, ladies and gentlemen of the jury? And when you noticed Mackenzie and the defendant, did you notice anybody else in the car at that moment?
I noticed that there was other kids in the car, just not sure exactly who they were.
Okay. But there were more kids in the car?
Yeah, probably 2 or 3.
When you noticed Mackenzie and the defendant in the car, where were they seated?
I believe she was in basically the middle of the back seat and he was to the driver's side window of the back seat, from what I recall.
So he's seated behind the driver?
I believe so.
And you indicated there was some arguing going on. Do you know who was doing the arguing?
No, I do not.
When you heard that there was arguing going on the other side of the car, what did you do next?
I walked around the front of the car again to see what was going on over there. And at that time, as I came around the front of the car, I saw something like get swung out the window. I wasn't exactly sure what it was at that point, and then I heard glass shatter, so I knew it was a glass bottle.
Recall what side of the car that came out of?
That came out of the driver back window.
And when that happened, what happened next?
After that happened, some of my friends started yelling things and rocking the car.
How many of your friends were near the car at this moment?
Probably a good 15 to 20 of us.
When this interaction is going on, what's the lighting like out?
It was dark, but there's lights on the house and the house across the street, so I was able to see everything in front of me, no problem.
When you and your friends approached the vehicle, did you have any weapons on you?
No, I did.
When your friends started screaming and shaking and kicking the car, tell us what happens next.
So at that point, I knew it was getting very chippy, and I was trying to prevent anything else from going on. So I kind of got in Jack Snyder's window, who was driving the car, and I was telling him, you need to leave, you need to drive out of here right now, and he wasn't listening to me. So I kind of proceeded to reach in the car towards the shifter and telling him, put your car in drive and leave now.
And what happened when you did that?
He just started rolling his window up on me, so I kind of had to pull my arms and stuff back out. And then finally we heard the car click into gear and they drove up the street going very fast. And as they were going up the street, we noticed that they were throwing cans and anything it seemed like they could find in the car out the window, and they were actually throwing it at other cars that were parked on the street. So they went up the street doing that, and we kind of took a step back, and I was able to take a breath and relax, thinking that they had left.
Show you stage one. When you say that they drove up the street, can you show the ladies and gentlemen of the jury where, you can use this, which way they drove? Now, did you recognize stage one?
I did.
This house here with the red dot, you know?
Yes, that's my house.
Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury which way they drove out the street?
So they went from here up the street this way, and as they went up the street, there was some cars parked here and here maybe. Things were getting thrown at the cars there, and then they continued up the street.
And when they continued up the street, were you thinking at that moment with regards to where the car was going?
My first thought at that moment was, okay, good, these kids left.
And did they leave?
They did not. Maybe a minute later, we saw the headlights coming back in the other direction, and all the stuff that they had thrown out of the car was being picked up by my friends. And as they came back down the street, some of my friends whose cars got hit and stuff started to throw things back.
What kind of things were thrown from the car at you guys?
I know some cans, like beer cans, and I think that was really it the first time they went up the street.
And when they came back down the street, that's when your friends picked up the cans that were thrown at you?
Correct.
And threw them back?
Correct.
And then what happened once they came back towards your house?
So they came back the second time.
Same way?
The first time they went up the street, they went that way. They came back the second time. Some of my friends started throwing things back. Then I believe they actually made the corner onto Adams, and they went up Adams. And then there was a third time they came back by again.
And what happened when they came back a third time?
They were still throwing stuff out of the car. It kind of seemed like they were like going through the trunk of the car to find whatever they could to throw. And there was a can of WD-40 and a few other things thrown out of the car that time.
And when those things were thrown out of the car, what did you do next?
I actually picked up the can of WD-40 and noticed that as the car went down the street, it kind of stopped right here on the corner of Laurel Glen and Farmhouse Lane.
And when you picked up the can of WD-40 and noticed the car stopped, what did you do?
Me, Ricky, and somebody else ran down the street. And as I ran down the street, I yelled, "Let's go, you pussies," and I threw the can at the back of the car, and then proceeded to tell them, get back in their car and please to leave my house.
Did you notice anybody outside the car when you went down the street?
I did notice a couple kids outside the car, but I wasn't really paying attention exactly who it was.
And when you went down the street, did you have any conversation with any of those kids that got out of the car?
Besides for just kind of yelling to get back in their car and get out of here, no.
You were screaming down the street. Did you engage in any physical altercation with anybody from the car?
No, we didn't.
When you went down the street, aside from throwing the WD-40 can back at the car, did you have any weapons on you?
No,
Do you know if Ricky Fiola had any weapons on him?
he did not.
After you threw the WD-40 can at the car, what did you do next?
I started to walk back to the house because people were still outside, and I was trying to get everyone to go back inside the house.
At some point in time, you tell them to get out, and you start walking back to the house.
Correct.
So you heard the individual yelling, that was you?
That was me, correct.
That video only captured a certain section of what occurred down the street. Is that
Yeah,
fair?
correct.
Do you remember who you had a conversation with down the street?
Not specifically, no.
The overall message you were giving when you got down there was,
Was that they needed to leave.
at some point in time, you walked back down towards your house,
I did.
and that means you're going back from Farmhouse Road down towards Adams.
Correct.
And when you're going back towards your house, what happens when you're walking back?
As I started to walk, one of the kids down there picked that can of WD-40 up and threw it at me again. I picked the can up and continued to walk towards the house, which is when the defendant came off the side of the bushes and was approaching me, and I told him to get the f out of here, and then I proceeded to tell him not to come near me, and instead of saying anything, he kept approaching me. I used the can of WD-40 to distance myself and kind of just started spraying it in his direction, which stopped him in his tracks. And then I didn't engage anything else with him. I continued walking back to the house and telling everybody else that they needed to go back inside.
Now, when you say he came out of the bushes, do you recall where on the street he came out of
He came from these bushes right here on the edge. He came off the side of them, and as I was walking, I heard a stick or something break, so I had turned my head, and that's when he was approaching me.
And how was his demeanor as he was approaching?
He was just walking towards me with a straight face and not saying anything, but as if he was approaching me to try and start something.
And how many times did you have to kind of tell him to?
Multiple times.
And at some point you sprayed him?
I did.
And his reaction to that was what?
He kind of just stood there, and I proceeded to walk away.
Did you engage in any physical altercation with the defendant?
No, I did not.
When you walked away, you went back to your house?
I did.
And when you went back to your house, you indicated that you told people to get back inside?
I did.
And when you did that, what happened next? Did you go inside?
Everybody started to make their way back into the house, and yes, I did go inside as well.
Now, when you walked back down the street, you indicated that earlier that you had originally walked down the street with Ricky Fiola and another individual. Do you know whether or not Ricky Fiola or that other individual came back before you or after you?
I walked back first, knowing that Ricky was still down there, that he was going to make sure that they left, which is what I figured would have happened. I never thought that they were going to keep coming back when they had every opportunity to leave. Ricky, I believe, stayed down there, and I'm not sure who else.
At some point in time, did Ricky come back to the house, if you can recall?
I don't recall him coming back inside, but he did walk back to the front yard.
At some point in time, did you go back inside your house?
I did.
And when you went back inside your house, where did you go?
I went into the basement.
Through the Bilko door?
I did.
And how long would you say you were inside the basement before the next series of events occurred?
I'm not sure exactly how long, but it had to only be within minutes when somebody started yelling that they were back and that they were in the front yard.
And when you heard that they were back and they were in the front yard, what did you do?
I proceeded to walk back outside the Bilko doors because it was made to my knowledge that they were now on my property. And I walked straight outside and saw the defendant and Mr. DaSilva standing on my yard, and the car was in the street still running with the driver in it.
Can you indicate where you saw the car parked when you came outside?
It was, if you're looking from the front of the house, it was kind of to the right of the mailbox, but there was a few cars parked there, so it was in the middle of the road.
Probably about right here in the middle.
Yeah, about there.
And when you got there, where did you notice Tyler DaSilva?
He was about somewhere in this area here, I would say. Tyler was around here somewhere, and I was facing the other way, so he was kind of off to my left, around here. But I believe me and Tyler DaSilva were a little bit closer to the cement box when I was talking to.
Probably where the tree is?
Yeah, around there.
Now, States 52, was this tree in your front lawn back in 14th to 20th?
No, it was not.
So that's a more recent picture, right?
Yes, it is.
So when you noticed the defendant and Mr. Silva on your front lawn, what did you do when you noticed them on your lawn?
I approached Tyler DaSilva basically was telling him, not in a nice manner, but that he needed to get the F off my property and get back in the car and leave. And that is when he decided to continue to argue with me. And I said right to him, dude, I have known your family and your cousins for a very long time. Please get back in your car and don't do this. And he then responded and told me to go F myself, and I didn't know anything about his family, and shoved me backwards.
How many people would you say were outside?
Pretty much everybody there, about 20 to 30.
Was there anybody close to the defendant while this was going on?
There was a few kids near the defendant at the time. I'm not sure exactly who, but I do know that Ty Wood was one of those kids.
How do you know Ty Wood?
Our families are very close. His brother, his older brother, and my older brother played football together. Have known each other forever. I played football with Ty. I was his captain when he was a sophomore and I was a senior. And I've also coached his younger brother's team. But Ty is about as close to a younger brother as it gets for me. And I look at him as my younger brother.
And when you noticed that Ty Wood was near the defendant, did you notice anybody else near the defendant at this moment?
I did, but I couldn't tell exactly who. I believe Heinz was over there as well.
And when you say Heinz, Ryan Heinz?
Correct.
And tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, when you were arguing back and forth with Tyler DaSilva, what happened?
He proceeded to tell me to go F myself and that I didn't know anything about his family, and then got physical with me and shoved me backwards. And I didn't go right at him or anything, but now that he had shoved me back, Lito was more so in my vision, not so peripheral to me, so I was able to see him better. And he was only a few feet away, and this is when I saw Ty Wood had his head turned, and Lito went to swing on him, so I stepped up into it and punched him in the face instead.
Prior to punching the defendant in the face, was the defendant having any type of argument or any type of interaction with anybody?
They were getting chippy over there.
When you say chippy, what does that mean?
Like they were arguing in a not a nice manner.
And did it, from your perspective, when you saw the defendant get chippy with your other friends on to the left of you, did it appear that the defendant was trying to act peacefully?
Not at all.
Did it appear that Tyler DaSilva was trying to act peacefully?
No, not at all.
And when you punched the defendant in the face, why did you do that?
I did that to defend Ty Wood. Like I said before, he is like a little brother to me. So when I had the opportunity to prevent him from being blindsided in the head, I stepped up and took the shot that I needed to.
And once you punched the defendant in the face, what happened next?
I immediately was getting punched in the back of the head by Tyler DaSilva. So I turned around and me and him kind of ended up in like a scuffle, and it went to the ground where he actually ended up on top of me.
And when he ended up on top of you, what was happening? What were you doing?
When we first got down on the ground, he was throwing shots at me still, so I kind of tied him up and like held his arms so that he couldn't swing at me, and that was kind of the only thing I saw from there on.
Did you have any weapons on you?
Nope.
Did you notice if any of your friends had any weapons on them?
No.
Did you notice anybody there during that interaction have any weapons on them?
No, I did not.
And at some point in time, did the fight end?
Yes, it
Tell
did.
how it ended.
So I was on the ground with Tyler from that point forward. Eventually, he was pushed off of me into the street, and at that point, I had gotten up, and that is when Tommy Connery came and approached me and told me that he was bleeding and needed stitches because he had just been stabbed.
How would you describe the fight?
It was very quick and it was just chaotic, but like I said, from my perspective, I couldn't see much because of how fast I ended up on the ground.
Do you know how many people were fighting with Tyler DaSilva?
It was just me on the ground with him, and then I believe some kids were standing over watching, and a few kids may have thrown a few punches as well.
Once the fight started and you punched the defendant, did you notice what happened to the defendant or any of your?
No, I didn't, because I was immediately being hit by Tyler DaSilva, so my focus kind of went to him.
Have you seen the video in relation to this case?
I have.
Yes, sir! Let's go, man!
Do you recall anybody yelling, "He's got a knife, he's got a knife"?
I do. At that point, I was just getting up off the ground, and that's when Tommy had said he was stabbed, so I started tendering aid to him.
I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 61. This is a still shot from the video you just watched. Can you see that, Tyler?
Yes, I can.
This individual to the left here with looks to be a white shirt, maybe pink shorts, the phone in his hand. Do you know who that is?
I do. That is Ricky Fiola.
Showing you State 62. You know who this is in the video?
I do. That is the defendant.
Showing you State 63. And point to this individual here with the green shirt, black shorts with white trim. Do you know who that is?
That is Ryan Heinz.
This guy here with the white shirt and the black shorts to his immediate right. Do you know who that is?
I believe that is Sal Perry.
And the guy with the green, with the no shirt on and the jeans on. Do you know who that is?
That is the kid Alex Brunson, I believe, that came with Tanner.
Who you met that night?
Yes.
This guy here with the black shirt, jeans on, and red hat. Do you know who that is?
That is Mike Samperi.
This individual with the kneeling on the ground with what appears to be their shirt pulled up. Do you know who that is?
That is Tyler DaSilva.
And if that is Tyler DaSilva, can you see yourself in this picture?
Not really. Maybe a little bit. Just to the left of like his lower back, you might see a little bit of me, but that is me on the ground.
And he's on top of you.
Correct.
Showing you State 64. Do you know who this individual is right here with the white shirt, black shorts, to the right of that?
I believe that is Charlie Connery.
And again, 65, same individual.
Charlie Connery.
I'm going to show you State 66. Do you know who this individual is right here with what appears to be a white shirt and tan shorts?
That is Jacob Villalobos.
How about this guy here with no shirt on with what appears to be camouflage shorts?
Matthew Rokovich.
And do you know who this individual is here with the blue shirt, white shorts?
Yes, that is Jimmy McGrath.
State 67. Again, this individual here appears to be pushing Tyler DaSilva.
Jacob Villalobos.
State 68. This individual with what appears to be their shirt pulled up with jeans on.
That is Tyler DaSilva.
Who is this individual to the left?
And that is the defendant to the left.
And that's the 69 person in the street here.
Tyler DaSilva again.
Who does this appear to be with the dark shirt and white shorts?
That is Jimmy McGrath.
Now, when Tommy indicated to you that he needed stitches, what did you do next?
Somebody had thrown us in a shirt or something, and we began tying off his legs where the stab wounds were on his one leg.
When you noticed that Tommy was stabbed, did you notice what happened with Tyler DaSilva and the defendant during this period of time?
No, I didn't. My focus wasn't on them, so I never even saw the car drive away.
At that point in time, when you were rendering aid to Tommy, did you notice anything else going on around you?
At first, I began to try and call 911, and then I let my father know what had happened. But until after I got off the phone with him, I hadn't realized that anybody else had been stabbed yet, except for Tommy. Upon getting off the phone and walking back up to the yard, I noticed that there was multiple kids on the ground, and that is when I realized that 4 kids had actually been stabbed, and not just Tommy.
Who were the other 3 that were stabbed?
It was Faison Teal had like a slice, and Ryan Hines had been stabbed a few times, and so it's Jimmy, Hines, Tommy, and Faison.
So you noticed Jimmy was stabbed?
Yes.
What did you notice about Ryan Hines?
I didn't see him at first. He was actually the last person I was informed was stabbed, because I believe he was in the house when they had realized he had gotten stabbed.
And what did you know about Jimmy?
I began to tender aid to him along with Sal Perry, and upon realizing how severe his wound was and having to see him struggle for his last breaths, I had to take myself away from the situation and sat on my back steps and waited for law enforcement to get there.
And you said you called your father. Was any parents home?
No, so my mom was on a trip in Cape Cod, and my dad had left before anyone came over because he had plans for the night.
And at some point in time, did law enforcement actually arrive?
They did.
And when they arrived, did you speak with law enforcement?
I did.
And did you give a statement in regards to this case?
I did, yes.
Did you notice if AMR or EMTs arrived on the scene to render any assistance?
They did, but I believe the cops were there first.
And after the cops arrived, the AMR came?
Yes.
Do you recall what the scene was like when first responders got there?
It was very hectic. At that point, there was some siblings, parents, and a lot of concerned family members that had actually lived close by that had gotten there before. So it was just more people showing up because everybody was coming to check on either their loved ones or their friends.
Were you interviewed more than once in relation to this case?
I was, yes. There was something in my original statement that night about me seeing the defendant with the knife or not that they called me back in to clarify.
And did you, in fact, do you recall what you said to the police originally?
Guy had said that he was flashing a knife, but I had to go back in to clarify that I actually never saw the knife.
So why would you have said in your original statement that he was flashing a knife?
Because somebody else had said that they had seen him flashing the knife.
So you were just kind of reiterating what somebody else.
Correct.
I have no further questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Morning, Mr. Ray.
Good morning.
We've never met before.
No.
Would you agree this is a larger map of your neighborhood?
Yeah, I would.
When we say a larger map, that's in reference to this Exhibit 1, right?
Correct.
That shows the entire neighborhood, so to speak.
Yes.
The one here on the screen, Exhibit A.
Yes.
And so would you agree, Mr. Rich, that your neighborhood is made up of a couple of through streets or streets that run the whole way through, and then there are a number of cul-de-sacs or dead ends that come off of those through streets?
Yeah, that's accurate.
Is Adams Drive one of those through streets, or is that a cul-de-sac at some point?
No, it's a cul-de-sac at the bottom there.
Is Laurel Glen Drive also a cul-de-sac on the either end?
Yeah, on the very end of it, it is.
Is Farmhouse Lane a cul-de-sac, or is that a through street?
That's a through street.
Now, you know that because you're familiar with this neighborhood and have lived there for how long?
Since I was about 4 years old.
And I want to go over some of what you've been telling us today. You would agree some of what you told us today you've never told anybody else before, right?
No, I wouldn't agree to that.
You would not agree to that? Who else did you tell about the can of WD-40?
I have told the state's detectives, and whenever it has been asked about, I have been telling them about it.
Whenever it has been asked about?
No, so that was something that I couldn't fully remember the night of, having the trauma of everything else. It was more so the main event of what happened on the front yard. That was something that had come back to me later on, but as soon as I had remembered it and was in any kind of interview again, I had brought it up and told them about it.
Would you be surprised to learn, sir, that that did not ever appear in any of the statements that you gave prior?
No, I would not, because as I said, those statements were prior to me being able to remember that.
Gotcha. So you've remembered it now today.
Yes, and prior to this.
You didn't remember it when you gave a statement on May 15th at 12:43 a.m. that you wrote in your own hand, right?
The following day?
12:43 a.m. on the 15th, that's right.
No, I did not.
And that was your own handwritten statement, correct?
I believe so.
Didn't mention the can of WD-40 then, did you?
No, because I hadn't remembered it.
Right. You spoke with Officer Nembhard. You didn't tell him anything about the WD-40 can, correct?
When was that?
Also on the 15th of May.
No.
And then again on the 15th of May, when you spoke with Officer Giddon, you didn't mention anything about this can of WD-40, did you?
No, so on the 15th of May, that was not something I had recalled.
And it wasn't something that you recalled when you spoke again to Officers Bitko and Staples at 11:25 a.m. with your father in your living room. No mention of that can of WD-40, correct?
Not that I recall, but what day was it?
The 15th.
So yeah, anything on the 15th, I had no recollection of that on the 15th.
And then again, when you spoke with Officers Bango and Iannotti on the 18th, because they wanted to clarify, as you've said, your statement, you didn't mention anything about the WD-40 at that date either, did you?
No, I did not.
But you're telling us about the can of WD-40 today.
Correct, because once I recalled it, I have not tried to hide it or anything at all.
Okay. So you were telling us that this party at your house began sometime in the area of 7 to 8 o'clock that day on the 14th, correct?
Yeah, around that time.
You were hanging out in the basement, correct?
Correct.
What was going on in the basement was maybe drinking a few beers, right?
I definitely know I had one or two, and I do know that there was other kids drinking as well.
Okay, so it wasn't maybe drinking a few beers. There was beers being drunk.
No, I said I drank a few beers.
Right. You said that maybe people were drinking a few beers.
No, people were drinking a few beers. There was
Definitely drinking a few beers.
definitely had a few beers, yes.
You yourself only had one or two?
Yes,
You sure about that?
I'm positive.
How are you so positive about that?
Because I know I didn't drink more than that. It was my house. I already had more people show up than were supposed to be there. I was making sure that everything stayed under control.
Well, when you say everything stayed under control, you were 18 at the time?
I was.
So you were breaking the law by drinking those one or two beers, correct?
Yeah.
But you considered that to be keeping things under control?
I mean, we were dumb high school kids. I think everybody's had a few beers in high school, but I think I also had everything in control until the point where the defendant and the car full of his friends arrived at the house.
Gotcha. It was all under control until that. Did you tell your folks that you were going to be having this party over at the house that night?
No, I didn't.
Mom was gone to Cape Cod,
Yes.
and Dad was out somewhere.
Yes.
You told us that you had a few folks there that you identified. One of those was Faison Teal.
Correct.
Another one was Tommy Connery,
Correct.
Ryan Heinz,
Correct.
and Jimmy McGrath.
Correct.
And you said that as far as those four folks go, these were kids that you had all grown up with, played football with, friends with, correct?
Correct.
And the same goes for Ricky Fiola. You grew up with him. He was part of your friend group, and you played football together.
Correct.
Sal Perry had been your best friend for a long time.
Correct.
Michael Sampieri, just a good friend for a long time.
Correct.
And then you told us that one kid who was there that you didn't really know was the first time you met him. That was Alex Burnson, correct?
Yes, it was.
Alex Burnson came with Tanner Chernowsky, right?
Yes.
How did you know Tanner Chernowsky?
I've grown up with him around the same mutual friends. We went to high school together, but we are friends, yes.
You were due to graduate that May, correct, or that June?
Yes.
And Tanner Chernowsky, he'd already graduated?
Yeah, he's the year above me.
Alex Burnson, he'd already graduated?
I don't know.
Tommy Connery, he had already graduated?
Yes, he did.
You told us that you also knew Griffin Marcinzik, correct?
Yep.
And you learned somehow, you told us, that Ryan Hines had been, as you described it, jumped earlier that night, correct?
Correct.
But you told us you hadn't learned anything about a group chat that was going on.
Correct. I had no idea that there was any text messaging being sent back and forth. All I knew was that they had come to my house, Ryan and Griffin, and I was told that they were having Tanner come get them with his friend Alex.
And that everybody was already there except for Tanner and Alex, correct?
So Tanner, Alex were the last two that showed up, and obviously before them it was Griffin and Heinz.
And so at that point, before Tanner and Alex show up, there were about 30 people at your house.
Total, yeah, there was about 30, but I would say probably only 18 to 20 of them were boys, and there was probably about 10 to 12 girls who obviously didn't partake in anything that happened that night.
18 to 20 boys, and then we also have to add in Tanner and Alex when they get there, correct?
Well, that 18 to 20, I would say, is with them, but if you want to say another two on top, I guess that's okay too.
Fair to say you didn't count the folks that were there, right?
Not that night, no.
So when you say 18 to 20 or 22, you're guessing, is that?
I'm not guessing. I was actually brought a list by the Shelton PD of names with about, I don't even know how many people on it from the both parties, and went through it and was able to identify, I believe it was 32 total people that were there. I could be wrong on that exact number, but it was definitely somewhere in the 30s.
And that was based on a list of names that the police gave you?
Correct.
You didn't give them the names?
No, they had names from statements and other names that have come up through the night.
And then you said, yeah, there may have been a little bit of drinking, just beer and seltzers, but not what it was made to be by the media. What did you mean by that?
Correct. This wasn't a alcohol-fueled 70 to 100 person party. This was just a big group of friends catching back up, and we were casually drinking a few beers. We weren't throwing cans around and drinking bottles of vodka and all that. We were just casually having a few drinks.
But initially, you didn't tell the cops that there had been this drinking going on there, correct?
I'm not sure.
Well, when you spoke to them that night and gave them your handwritten statement, you didn't write anything in that statement about drinking going on at the party, correct?
I do not believe so.
Why not?
Like I said, the main focus that night was 20 minutes after a traumatic event where I just watched 4 of my best friends get stabbed, and I had unfortunately had to watch one of them bleed out in my front yard. So at the given time of that statement, the main priority was to get the key details of what happened in the front yard.
Or to shape the story, right? To protect yourself and to protect your friends.
No, sir.
You weren't afraid that anybody might get in trouble if there was an admission of drinking going on that evening?
No, sir, but that's not under my control.
So you weren't afraid of that possibility, or you recognized it wasn't under your control and so you didn't
I mean,
give that up?
the cops were there, the law was there. If they felt it was something that needed to do, I'm not the law, so I don't know.
It wasn't something you were going to volunteer, is that fair to say?
When asked about it, I've always said that there was some drinking.
And then you said at some point someone showed up to the house in a Honda Pilot, correct?
Correct.
And you were shown a picture of that Honda Pilot that states at number 30. Remember seeing that?
Yes, I do.
That's the same vehicle that you identified for us earlier, correct?
Yes, it is.
And when that vehicle showed up, it didn't have this damage to its windshield, did it?
Where?
You see this defect in the windshield here, sir, where I'm pointing right to the passenger side of the vehicle?
I can't really see it, but to my knowledge, I didn't really recognize anything with the windshield.
When that Honda Pilot showed up, you told us that you were still in the basement, correct?
Correct.
And you said we exited through the Bilco doors, right?
Yes.
And when you say we, that's the 18 to 20 boys that were there in the basement?
Yes, correct.
And you went out through the Bilco doors to the right of the AC unit, correct?
Yep,
And you walked down the driveway and then you went across the street, correct?
I did.
And at this point, there were folks that were all inside the vehicle, correct? Nobody was outside the vehicle that was not with your party?
You mean the kids that came in the car were not outside the vehicle? No, they were not. They were in the car still.
And you said that you went immediately up to Tyler DaSilva, who you could see through the windshield, correct?
Correct.
And that's because you knew Tyler DaSilva, right?
I didn't know him. I knew who he was, and I knew of him because, as I said before, I grew up with his cousins who lived down the road from me.
Right. And you thought that you also knew his older brother, correct?
I have met him a time or two.
And you thought that you had enough rapport with Tyler DaSilva that you could talk to him, right?
Correct. I thought if anyone was going to be the one I was going to talk to get them to leave, I had my best chance with him.
And you told us again that at that time you weren't aware of the group chat, right?
No, I was not.
You didn't know Griffin Marcinzik was live texting this, taking photos.
I didn't find out about the group chat until I believe the next day or the following day when Officer Staples came to my house.
And you were standing on the grass on the other side of Laurel Glen Drive talking to Tyler through the passenger side window, correct?
Correct.
And at this point, the car is facing Farmhouse Lane, right?
Yes, it was.
And you noticed that people were arguing on the other side of the car, right?
Yes, I did.
And in fact, you told Officer Giddon that you recognized inside the car Mackenzie Traffic County, correct?
Yes.
As well as Caitlin and Autumn Murphy, correct?
I never said that.
You never told Officer Giddon that you saw Caitlin and Autumn Murphy inside the Pilot?
Not to my knowledge.
Do you know Caitlin and Autumn Murphy?
I do know who they are.
Who are they?
They are 2 girls that went to Shelton schools with us when we were younger, and they both also went to St. Joseph's High School.
And were they at your party as part of the...
No, they were not.
And you claim that you did not tell Officer Giddon that you also saw Caitlin and Autumn Murphy in that car?
I don't believe I did, and if I had said that, it was me saying that I had heard somebody else say that they were in the car. So that should have been clarified.
There was a lot of people talking after the fact, right?
I mean, yeah, we talked about it.
Right, everybody was trading information,
Somewhat, yeah.
and you would agree that some of that information just simply wasn't true, right?
So how would he know?
I'll sustain it to the extent that it is broad. Counsel, if you want to limit it.
Did you come to learn that some of that information that you received was not actually true?
I guess we could say little bits and pieces, but nothing that was relevant to what had taken place that night.
Well, you told the officers that you saw the defendant flashing a knife, right?
Well, they brought me back in to clarify
You
that.
told the officers that, correct?
No, I believe I wrote that.
When you wrote that, who were you writing that for, Mr. Rich?
I was writing that for the police.
So you told the police that you saw the defendant flashing a knife, correct?
At the time I wrote it like that, but as I said before, they brought me back in to clarify that I never saw the knife, not one time the entire night.
You didn't volunteer that information later, right? When you said, hold on a second, I told those officers I saw a knife, but I didn't. I better go clarify it. You didn't do that, right?
I did do that.
You went to them and said, I need to clarify this for you?
So they had called me and told me that there was a few things in my statement that they wanted to double check. So they brought me back in, and immediately when they said, did you actually see him with the knife with your own two eyes? I said, no, I did not.
So again, that's not something you volunteered until they said, hey, we want to clarify a few things between your statements, right?
If you want to put it that way, I guess, but that was just because it was not to my knowledge.
Well, you didn't tell them that on the 15th, right?
No, I did not.
You didn't tell them that on the 16th, right?
No, I did not.
Didn't tell them that on the 17th, right?
No, I did not.
And it wasn't until the 18th when they called you and said, we need to clarify some things. We think there's some discrepancies in your statement, that you then told them you hadn't actually seen the defendant
Correct,
with a knife,
because prior to that, I didn't even know that it was something on there that needed to be clarified. So as soon as they brought me in and asked me, did you actually see the knife? I said, no, I did not.
You didn't know that when you wrote at 12:43 a.m. in your own hand that you saw a kid named Lito flashing a knife. You didn't know that that was something that you needed to clarify because it wasn't something you'd actually seen?
No, sir. At the time when I wrote that, as I said, it was a very traumatic experience for us. I've never had to give a statement before, and I've never had to write one, so I didn't know that that was something I couldn't write off of hearing it from somebody else.
So you didn't know that you needed to tell them the truth about what you had seen?
I did know that I needed to tell them the truth. I just didn't know that I needed to clarify that I wasn't the one that saw him with the knife.
Well, and you also didn't tell them about the can of WD-40 that you sprayed at the defendant, as you say, in his area, right?
I'm going to object as asked and answered.
I'll overrule it.
Sorry, can you repeat?
Sir, you didn't tell them about the can of WD-40 that you're now telling us about, right?
On which day?
On any of these days, on the 15th when you gave various statements, on the 18th when you gave a statement.
I don't believe I did because it was not knowledge that I had remembered yet.
And you also didn't tell them that you're the one who threw the first swing at Mr. Valle, right?
I'm not sure, but I do believe that I did clearly state that I was in the fight. But yeah, it probably took me a little bit of time to remember exactly what had happened. But I did tell them that I was involved in the fight, yes.
Well, you didn't tell them that in your handwritten statement, right?
I'm not sure. I believe I did.
You don't think that you said, everyone was standing in my yard, everyone started going at it, and the next thing I saw was blood everywhere?
Sorry, can you repeat?
That's right. You don't think what you told them was, everyone was standing in my yard, everyone started going at it, and the next thing I saw was blood everywhere?
I believe I did write that at the time.
And you didn't say anything about, I threw the first punch at Mr. Valle because I was trying to defend Ty Woods.
No, I guess not.
In any event, you claim that you were standing there at the front passenger window talking to Tyler DaSilva when you heard some arguing going on the other side, right?
Correct.
You looked through the car and you Mackenzie Traficante and Mr. Valle in the back seat, right?
Correct.
You knew Mackenzie because you grew up together, right?
Yep.
And you knew that there were other kids in the car, but right now you're not sure who that was.
No idea.
Even though you told the cops that you saw Caitlin and Autumn Murphy, right?
Correct, which was
ended
just
up not
something
being
I had
true, right?
heard.
That was
As
something
I
else
said,
that you just heard.
there was other kids in the car. I wasn't able to tell who it was, so when somebody had said that them two were in the car, I figured that they could have been the other people in the car.
Gotcha. You figured that that's who it was. Now you know that that's not who it was because
Correct.
you were there, right? But you told the cops that at the time.
I guess I did, yeah.
At this point, there's, by your estimate, 15 to 20 Shelton High kids surrounding this Honda Pilot, correct?
I wouldn't say surrounding. I believe I was actually the only one on the passenger side of the car. and I could be wrong, but to what I remember, I think I was the only one on that side of the car, and everybody else was on the driver's side between the car and my yard.
In fact, they weren't just on the driver's side between the vehicle and your yard, were they?
What do you mean by that?
They had their hands on the vehicle, right?
Some of them did.
Some of them did. Some of them were rocking the car back and forth, correct?
Correct, after a bottle was swung out of the back seat.
Let's talk about that bottle getting swung out of the back seat. You were walking around the front of the car when you saw this happen?
As I came around the front driver's side to see what was going on the other side of the car, I was able to see a hand come out the window in a swinging down motion, and I couldn't tell what it was. And then I heard the glass shatter and saw the shattered glass. And
Where's the shattered glass that you saw?
from the driver's side window, it was on the street right there.
Directly down in front of the vehicle,
Pretty close.
with these 15 to 20 people standing all on that one side of the vehicle, rocking it back and forth?
Correct, when they started rocking the vehicle after.
So you hear glass shatter,
Correct.
and then they start rocking the vehicle.
Yes.
And all 15 to 20 of those kids, by your estimate, are not actually surrounding the car, but they're all just on one side of the car.
From what I recall, I believe that everybody was mainly on the driver's side.
And then, in the midst of all this shaking and rocking of the car, you say you reach in through the driver's side window over top of Mr. Snyder and grab the gear shift.
I reached for the shifter. I believe it was by the steering wheel on the column. So I reached towards it because he wasn't even considering when I was telling him to leave. So I made him see that I was going for his shifter, telling him to put his car in drive and go, because at that point when kids started shaking the car, I knew that if they didn't leave there, that this was going to turn into something bigger.
And Mr. Snyder, then, as you're reaching and leaning across and grabbing his shifter, he starts to roll up the window. You say you heard the car click into gear,
Yeah, and we saw the lights.
and then they drove up the street fast, right?
They did.
And when you say they drove up the street fast, did they drive down Laurel Glen towards Farmhouse Lane?
That's correct.
And you said as they did that, they were throwing cans and things out the windows, right?
They were
But nobody from your group was throwing anything at the vehicle.
not at that moment.
How many people were outside at this point?
Everybody that was there, I believe, was outside.
So they drive down to the end of Farmhouse Lane. Did they come back at that point, or did they stop and get out what we saw on the video?
I don't know for sure, but I want to say the first time they went down the street, they actually went past Farmhouse Lane to the point where we could no longer see the car, which is why I had thought that they left at that point. Then we were able to see the headlights coming back in the other direction, and that is when they came back for the second time after they drove away and could have left.
Was that before or after you went down to the end of Farmhouse Lane?
When I walked down, that was before.
So they drive away.
Correct. They drive towards Farmhouse. I believe they went past. Then they come back down, past my house again, towards Adams, where I believe they make that corner onto Adams.
When you say they make that corner, if we're looking at Exhibit 1, are you saying that they take a right onto Adams?
This way.
And then where did you see the car after that?
And then after that, it comes back down the way it just came. So I'm not sure if maybe they turned around over here or what, but they ended up coming back from the same direction that the car had just previously gone in and drove by the house again, throwing more things out of the car, including the WD-40, and that is when the car stops by Farmhouse Lane after that.
So just want to make sure we've got your series of events down. Car initially arrives, it's parked at the corner near Adams Drive and on the other side of Laurel Glen from your house, correct?
Correct.
That's when you and the 15 or 20 folks all go outside and confront the car, right?
Yes.
And you claim to hear glass shatter while there's 15 or 20 people there on one side of the vehicle. They're shaking and rocking the car. You somehow get in and lean across Mr. Snyder, correct?
Sorry, can you repeat the part?
You get in and lean across Mr. Snyder.
No, before that.
You have seen glass shatter. There's 15 or 20 people shaking the vehicle, and you lean in across and grab the shift, right?
Yeah.
At that point, you say you hear the vehicle click into gear and it drives down towards Farmhouse Lane, correct?
Correct.
Turns around by your account and comes back towards your house, correct?
Correct.
Makes a turn, a right onto Adams Drive, correct? You lose sight of the vehicle?
I did.
How long before you see it again?
Not that long. Like I said, they had to have turned around somewhere close because it came back pretty quick.
Could you see who was in the vehicle at that point?
At that point, I believe nobody had gotten out yet because at the rate of speed he was driving before, if anyone had gotten out of that car, they would not have just been able to step out unless he had stopped somewhere else and let people out. But
If your recollection is accurate, right?
correct, but to what I would think that everybody was still in the car at that point.
But you don't know who was in the vehicle.
I do not. That is fair to say.
And as it comes back up, Adams, you say it turns onto Laurel Glen Drive, goes past the house again,
Correct.
and down towards Farmhouse Lane.
Correct.
And is it at that point that you see the vehicle stop?
Correct.
And it's at that point that you and what you describe as a group of three, yourself, maybe Ryan Hines, Ricky Fiola, or someone else that you couldn't know. So it was yourself and Ricky Fiola and someone else who you're not sure about went down the street, right?
Correct. So the only one I know that was with me was Ricky. I can't recall who else was with us, but it was definitely, I never said Ryan Hines, no.
But you can't be sure that it wasn't him, right? Because there was
I
someone
can't
else.
be sure. I do know there was at least one other person, but I'm not sure who that was.
And you think it was just the three of you who went down the street, right?
I believe so.
May we see Exhibit 44, please?
The disc.
I'm gonna ask you to watch this video with us. We pause it right there. You recall seeing this video just shortly ago.
Yes.
And this is shot from the Ring camera on 36 Laurel Glen Drive, which is the house down Laurel Glen Drive there on Exhibit 1 by the corner of Farmhouse Lane.
Yes.
Now, in this video, Mr. Rich, do you see somebody already walking ahead of this last illuminated tree that we see there?
Over here on the corner?
I'm going to point over here. See this last illuminated tree to the far right, just past one of the columns?
Yeah, do I see anyone over there?
You see somebody walking right here.
I can't tell.
Can we start that from the beginning? And I'd ask you to focus your attention to this person walking. Do you see somebody walking there?
I do.
Do you see that there's a vehicle? We just heard doors, cars stop, and we see somebody else walking
Correct.
by the vehicle, in front of the vehicle, correct?
I do see that.
So those folks are already out of the car, and now we're hearing some yelling, correct?
Yep.
And from the left, we're starting to see your group, right?
Correct.
I count 1, 2, 3, 4. Would you agree 4 people so far?
Right.
And I see a 5th person. Do you see that?
I do.
Do you see other folks coming as well? 6, 7. Do you see those other folks?
I do see more, yes.
And those people are all coming from the direction of your home, correct?
So as it appears, yes.
You would agree that there was at least 2 people that were out of that vehicle, correct?
Prior to us walking down,
Prior to you walking down.
I would agree.
And that then a group of at least 7 of you were seen on that video, correct?
That's how it appears, but as I said, to my knowledge, the only one I knew was with me was Ricky, and I thought there was at least one more of us. Clearly, there was more than that.
And in fact, you walked past and had some interactions with the people that had already gotten out of the vehicle, correct?
I did.
But you don't recall any of that, fair to say?
I didn't say I don't recall any of that. I just don't recall who was actually out of the vehicle.
Well, you told us that you didn't have any interactions with the people in the vehicle at that point, correct?
Other than telling them to get out of there and that they needed to go, not really, no.
And at this point, they are down in front of Laurel Glen Drive, heading towards Farmhouse Lane, right?
What's that?
They were down at this point where we see it on the video, down in front of 36 Laurel Glen Drive by Farmhouse Lane, correct?
Correct.
And that is about 2 football fields or 647 feet away from your house. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's probably pretty accurate.
And you followed that vehicle all the way down there, right?
When people started to get out, yeah, we walked down there.
And you told them, "Let's go, you pussies," right?
Correct.
And that's when you say you threw the can of WD-40, right?
I did.
You later picked that can back up, you're now telling us, right?
After it was thrown at me again, I didn't want to leave it in the street in front of my neighbors' houses, so yes, I picked it up.
We didn't see that can getting thrown back at you on this video, did we?
Nope.
And you said after that you were just walking back to the house trying to get everyone back inside, right?
I was heading back towards the house with the intent to get everyone back there into the house, yes.
And did you call the police at that point?
No, I did not.
Well, why not?
Because I figured that every time they drove away, I thought that they were going to leave. I guess thinking about it now, knowing that they had the first two opportunities to not come back when they drove away and they didn't, I probably should not have made the assumption that they weren't going to leave. But never in a million years did I ever think that this was going to happen, so I did not call the police.
You didn't call the police and say, hey, there's unwanted people at our house and they're throwing stuff at us, because you didn't want the cops to come and find out that there was underage drinking, right?
Rephrase that?
Well, you
Or
didn't call
repeat
the
that?
cops to report what you are now telling us was a crime at that time, did you?
No, I did not.
And it wasn't because you didn't want the cops to come and find out that there was underage drinking going on, right?
I'm confused what you're asking. So you're asking me if the reason I didn't call the cops was because there was underage drinking at my house?
Right.
No, the reason I didn't call the cops was because I figured these kids were going to leave at any of the given 3 or 4 times they had the opportunity to. And I never thought in a million years that they were going to come back to my house, trespass on my property, and stab 4 of my friends.
Are you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Is there a question pending, Your Honor?
There was not at that point.
Counsel.
So it wasn't because you were afraid of underage drinking going on at the house. That wasn't the reason that you didn't call the cops.
No.
The reason was that you thought you could handle this yourself.
I thought that they were going to leave any of the 4 times they could have. And like I said, I guess thinking back now, knowing that the first 3 times they could have left when they had the opportunity, they didn't. Maybe I should have handled it different. But again, who would have ever thought that 3 juniors or whatever they were in high school from St. Joe's were going to come back to my house, trespass on my property, and stab 4 of my friends?
And then you told us that as you're walking back to the house, someone threw a can of WD-40 at you, correct?
Correct. They threw it back at me.
And that the defendant came off the side of the bushes, correct?
Correct.
You told him not to come near you, right?
I did.
And then you used the can of WD-40 to spray it in his direction, right?
I did.
What you actually did was you sprayed it right in his face and his eyes, right?
I'm not sure. Like I said, I was spraying it in his direction. He kept approaching me, so I can't tell you where he was getting sprayed. I aimed the can at him and I sprayed it to use it to distance myself.
And you just saw yourself in that video pass by him while he was standing on the street, not in that vehicle, correct?
Probably, but I'm not sure if that was him or where he was at that time.
And you never told the officers in any of your prior statements about the defendant throwing this WD-40 at you and coming off the side of the bushes, right?
Well, one, I don't know if he threw it at me. I'm not sure which one of them threw it at me, but given where he was when he came out of the bushes, when they threw it back at me, I don't believe it could have been him because he was obviously already down by those bushes for me to have walked by him over there.
You don't
And it
think
came
it was
from
him?
behind me more towards the car.
So you don't think that it was him throwing that
I
can of WD-40?
don't think he's the one that threw it back at me when I had picked it up to walk back to the house because he was already obviously down in that direction somewhere for him to have come out behind me.
And then you told us that everybody started to make their way back into the house, right?
Correct.
Through the Bilco doors.
Correct.
You walked back first, but you knew that Ricky was still down there at Farmhouse Lane.
I did.
How did you know that he was still down there?
Because I walked back by myself and he's the only one I knew went down there with me. And if he didn't come back with me, he had to still be down there.
Where were these other 5 or 6 people that we saw here in this video?
They must have been down there as well, but I'm not sure.
You don't recall Ricky coming back inside, but you're certain you went back inside.
I 100% went back inside.
Who else went back inside with you?
I'm not sure exactly who. There was still a large crowd out in the front, and I kind of was just motioning everybody to get back inside the house.
What was the large group out in the front still doing?
Probably standing there. Honestly, I'm not sure. I was down the street, but as soon as I got back to the house, I had everybody go back inside.
Even the folks that remained in the yard that you just described?
I'm sorry, what's that?
You told us you went back into the house, but that people remained in the front yard. Now you're telling us you had everybody go back inside.
Who remained in the front yard?
You tell me, sir. You're the one who said people remained in the front yard.
I never said anybody remained in the front yard. I said the only people that were still out there was, to my knowledge, Ricky down the street, but I had everybody else around there go back into the house that was still in the front
You
yard.
went into the basement after coming back from Farmhouse Lane, you're saying there was nobody else in the front yard.
I do not believe so, no.
And then you heard somebody yelling, "They're back," right?
Correct.
And you looked out and you could see that they were in the front yard.
Well, we walked back outside, and upon coming up on the front yard, I was able to see the car in the street with the headlights on, and the defendant and Tyler DaSilva were now trespassing on my property.
And at that point, you go out into the front yard, correct?
Correct.
How many people were out in the front yard with you?
I believe everybody had followed me back outside. I don't think anyone was going to leave me to go out there alone. So eventually the entire basement did make its way back outside, and I believe everyone did make their way back out there.
About 30 of you out there in the front yard?
Yeah, including girls too.
And you described your position as being near the cement box and the red bush, right?
Relatively, yes.
And that Tyler DaSilva was in front of you, correct?
Correct.
Near the mailbox.
Towards the mailbox.
And that Mr. Valle was off to your left, by the left of the bush and the right of the cement box, right?
What was that last part? To the left of the what?
To the left of the red bush and to the right of the cement box.
Which way are you looking at that? From the street or from the house?
I believe you described it as being Valle was off to your left,
He was off to my left, correct, with my back to the house, so yes.
so you couldn't really see where Mr. Valle was, right?
He was peripheral to me, so I was able to see him and the couple kids over there and know where their position was because they weren't that far. They were only maybe 2 steps away from me. But until the fact where Tyler DaSilva shoved me backwards is when they came into my foot.
And you said that, again, you approached Tyler DaSilva because you knew him and his cousins, right?
Correct.
You said, dude, I've known your family and cousins for years, right?
Correct.
At this point, where are the other 30 people?
I wasn't paying attention to that, but I believe some kids were still coming out of the basement at that point, and I believe that there were people behind me and also to the side of me.
Could you see anybody in front of you near the street?
I don't recall anyone being over there. Could there have been? Maybe, but I do not remember.
And it is your recollection that Tyler DaSilva told you to go fuck yourself and shoved you backwards, correct?
Correct.
With these other 30 kids behind you,
Correct, which he knew.
which he knew that there were 30 kids.
They have obviously seen the amount of kids there were. The minute we walked out to the car the first time, they proceeded to keep coming back knowing that there was 30 kids or 20 dudes standing there.
And you said that there were a few kids near Mr. Valle, right?
I believe so, yes.
And one of those you knew, and that was Ty Woods.
Correct.
You described him as close to a younger brother for you as it gets, right?
That's right.
And after the shove, you've now got Mr. Valle in your vision, and you say that he went to swing on Ty Woods.
Correct. I watched him take a backswing like he was going to hit him in the back of the head, and Ty had his head turned. I was only 2 steps away. I pretty much stepped into it to get between it and punched him in the face.
And then after that, you say that Mr. DaSilva punched you in the back of your head.
Correct.
How do you know that was Mr. DaSilva punched you in the back of your head?
Because nobody else that was at my house was going to be punching me in the back of the head. And he is also the one that just pushed me from the direction where the punches were coming from to the back of my head.
It wasn't because the group of 20 to 30 people was stampeding forwards and people got shoved into one another.
You would have to ask him that, not me. But to what I know, I didn't see any of that going on after, because after I had hit the defendant, that was the last time I ever saw him that entire night, because as I said, when I was getting punched in the back of the head, my focus had turned to Tyler DaSilva at this point, who I ended up on the ground with instead.
Now, again, you're telling us today that you swung and hit Mr. Valle in the face that evening, but you didn't tell that to the officers when you spoke to them on the 15th a couple times, or the 18th, correct?
I guess not. I had told them I was in the fight, and there was only 2 kids that I could have been fighting with, so
You didn't tell them that you threw the first punch.
I guess not. At the time, I guess not, no.
And you say that you went to the ground and that Mr. DaSilva was on top of you,
Correct.
and that he was swinging and you tied up his arms, right?
Correct.
And that you couldn't see much after that. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I was on the ground underneath him, so I couldn't see anything.
And despite having told officers originally that you'd seen Lito with a knife, ultimately what you told us here today is that you didn't see the defendant with a knife, correct?
I had never seen the knife that entire night with my own eyes at all.
And you would agree, and you've described for us, that this fight was a chaotic scene, correct?
It was a chaotic scene, yes.
And there were only 2 kids that got out of the vehicle that were from the St. Joe's party, correct?
Correct. 2 of them got out of the car.
And there were roughly 30 of you, 20 of which you've described as being boys, correct?
Correct, which they,
In fact, you continue to tell me that, sir, which they knew. How do you know what they knew?
because they were in the car when we all came outside. They saw how many of us there were. They drove up and down the street 3 or 4 times and saw that there was that many of us. And even when he came on my property, nobody immediately got physical with them. I was still trying to talk to Tyler DaSilva and get him to leave. And they saw with their own eyes how many of us were standing there and decided that he was going to get physical with me. So yeah, they knew how many of us were there.
So it's your recollection that Mr. DaSilva is the one who decided to get physical with you.
Correct, he shoved me.
Was Mr. DaSilva at any point holding a phone or filming any of this as it was going on?
I don't think so, but I'm not sure.
Did you ever see Mr. Valle with a phone filming or recording anything of what was going on?
Nope,
Did you see, however, a video of the fight itself?
I did.
And that was taken by Tanner Chernowsky, correct?
Correct.
And you also identified for us another person who is in that video with a phone in his hand, and that was Ricky Fiola, correct?
Correct.
And was there anybody else that you saw that was filming that evening?
I was on the ground. I didn't see anybody filming or holding a phone until I saw the video after, which I still am not even sure if there was a recording going or if those were just flashlights. But yeah, I didn't see anybody else recording, no.
Well, you did see the video, correct?
I did
Recorded
see
by
that
Tanner
video
Chernowsky.
Tanner took, correct.
So you know that that one video
I
was
do know that
taken,
that
correct?
video was taken.
And did you tell any of the officers that that video existed?
No, I did not. They actually showed it to me first, and that was my first knowledge of it.
You didn't know about that video until it was shown to you by the officers?
Correct.
Are you friends with Tanner Chernowsky?
I am.
On his Snapchat stories?
Yeah, I am.
And you weren't aware that he had posted it that very evening?
I was not aware that he had posted it ever, and I had never seen it, so no, I was not.
So, Mr. Rich, is it fair to say that despite a number of opportunities to tell the police, as much as what you have recalled today, you didn't actually tell them any of those things regarding the WD-40 can?
Objection asked and answered.
Sustained.
Is it fair to say that despite having a number of opportunities, you didn't tell them that you were the person who first punched Mr. Valle?
Objection asked and answered.
Sustained.
Is it fair to say that you didn't call the police that night at any point?
Objection asked and answered.
I'll allow that one.
No, I did not call the police at any point that night.
And you told officers that you had seen the defendant with a knife, despite the fact that now you're telling us you never saw him with a knife, correct?
No, I did not.
Sustained. Strike the last answer, please. Thank you.
Just a moment, Your Honor. Mr. Ritt, there were essentially 2 fights going on in the front yard, were there not?
As far as what I'm aware of, I can only speak for what was going on with me and Tyler DaSilva at the time I was on the ground with him because I could not see anything else.
And how many people were engaged with Mr. DaSilva when you were also on the ground with him?
To my knowledge, just me and him. Do I think people could have thrown a couple shots at him? It's possible, but from what I could see, just me and him were on the ground.
When you say it's possible that other people could have thrown shots at him, you've viewed the video of the fights, correct?
Correct.
You see people throwing shots at him, correct?
Correct.
It's not just possible. That happened, didn't it?
Yeah, so a couple kids did throw a couple shots in after, but I could not see that from where I was on the ground.
And you would agree that there was a separate fight going on involving Mr. Valle, correct?
I'm not sure.
Nothing further. Thank you.
Can you redirect?
Briefly?
Sure.
Tyler, counsel asked you about Tanner and Alex coming to the house. What do you recall about when Tanner and Alex actually showed up in relation to when the Honda Pilot was at your house?
So when we had first went outside, I believe Tanner and Alex had not gotten there yet until after the first time the car drove down the street. I believe the first time when they went down the street, it took them a little longer to come back because they had went all the way to the dead end, or at least out of our view. And as the car went down the street, from what I recall, I believe is when Tanner and Alex got there.
And when Tanner and Alex got there, where were you at that moment?
I was in the front yard.
Now, counsel asked you a little bit about your statement to police initially. You had indicated that you had seen, well, at least according to your statement, you indicated that you had told the cops that he was flashing a knife. Where did that information come from? Did you actually see that happen?
No, I never saw that.
So why would you tell the cops that a kid named Lito was flashing a knife?
It was something I had overheard that night, and as a 18-year-old kid who's never had to go through something traumatic like that, I didn't know that I couldn't write something in my statement without physically seeing it. So I was brought back in to clarify that. I didn't see that.
So based on the fact that you have 4 of your friends that were stabbed on the front lawn, what was your intuition, what was your reason for telling the cops what you did at that moment with regards to what you saw at that moment? Did you have a reason why you didn't recall the WD-40 can or anything like that? Why did you say what you did?
Yeah, of course. I mean, in that time period, like I've been saying, I was an 18-year-old kid who just watched 4 of my best friends get stabbed in my front yard where I grew up at my own house. And having to go through that, I believe that there was just certain things that my mind was putting out of my head, and I was more focused on the events that took place during the actual fight itself.
On a subsequent occasion, did you eventually tell somebody about this?
I did.
And on a subsequent occasion, did you eventually tell somebody about you throwing a punch at them?
I did.
Now, you saw States 44, which is the 36 Laurel Glen video, the ring video. Does that camera capture everything that happened with all the interactions down the street? In other words, you see yourself throwing the can at the car. At some point, that camera stops, right?
Correct.
And at some point in time, there are other things that happened that just weren't captured on that camera.
Correct.
So with regards to where the defendant may have been standing at any given moment during that video and where he was when he was coming out of the woods at you when you had the WD-40 can in your hand, would that have happened before or after the events that we see in States 44?
After.
And with regards to the number of people that were captured on States 44 from your group that go down the street, to the best of your recollection, you only recalled Ricky Fiola and maybe one other person.
Correct.
Clearly, there were more from your group down the street.
So, yeah,
Now, when you came back from down the street, were you by yourself?
I was.
And when you came back from down the street, you indicated that Ricky Fiola was still behind you down the street?
Correct.
So when you got to the front lawn and you were ushering people back in your house, you went down the basement with people that you ushered with back inside your house? But that didn't include Ricky Fiola,
No, it did not.
So if there were at least 7 people down the street, you being one and Ricky being another, there's at least 5 other people that are probably still down the street and coming back down towards the house, right?
Correct.
So when you go back in the house, some of your friends could have still come back and been on the front lawn.
Right.
You just wouldn't know who it was.
Correct.
And when the car came back down the street and you heard they're back, did that come from inside the house or outside the house?
That came from outside, I believe, because somebody had looked out the doors and saw the car pull back up.
But you don't know who said that?
No.
No further questions.
Any additional cross?
Just briefly, you told us that part of the reason that you were unable to recall some of what you've told us today was due to the trauma, correct, of this incident?
Correct.
So it wasn't that you wanted to minimize the involvement of your friends on that evening,
What do you mean by that?
as far as why you weren't able to recall these things when you were talking to police officers beforehand. It wasn't because you wanted to minimize the involvement that your friends had.
You mean like try to hide things my friends did?
Correct.
No, I wasn't trying to minimize anything.
You weren't trying to protect your friends from any sort of police investigation.
I mean, no, that's nothing that's inside of my control anyways.
And then you had been asked about telling that to folks on a subsequent occasion about the WD-40 and about throwing the first punch. Do you recall that question?
Can you repeat that?
Sure. The state's attorney asked you that about not telling folks about the WD-40 or about the throwing of the punch, right?
Yeah,
And then he asked you, but you did tell them that on a subsequent occasion, correct?
correct.
And that subsequent occasion was today, correct?
No.
Nothing further.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right.